However, this prospect hindered no one. The pay was good, and everyone had a share in the speculation, so that a great number of the finest sailors soon presented themselves. James Playfair was only embarrassed which to choose, but he chose well, and in 24 hours his muster-roll bore the names of 30 sailors, who would have done honour to Her Majesty's yacht. The departure was settled for the 3rd of January. On the 31st of December the Dolphin was ready, her hold full of ammunition and provisions, and nothing was keeping her now. 208 The skipper went on board on the 2nd of January, and was giving a last look round his ship with a captain's eye, when a man presented himself at the forepart of the Dolphin, and asked to speak with the captain. One of the sailors led him on to the poop. He was a strong, hearty-looking fellow, with broad shoulders and ruddy face, the simple expression of which ill concealed a depth of wit and mirth. He did not seem to be accustomed to a seafaring life, and looked about him with the air of a man little used to being on board a ship. However, he assumed the manner of a jacktar, looking up at the rigging of the Dolphin, and waddling in true sailor fashion. When he had reached the captain, he looked fixedly at him and said, "Captain James Playfair." "The same," replied the skipper. "What do you want with me?" "To join your ship." "There is no room, the crew is already complete." "Oh, one man more or less will not be in the way, quite the contrary." "You think so," said James Playfair, giving a sidelong glance at his questioner. "I am sure of it," replied the sailor. "But who are you?" asked the captain. "A rough sailor with 2 strong arms, which I can tell you are not to be despised on board a ship, and which I now have the honour of putting at your service. But there are other ships besides the Dolphin, and other captains besides James Playfair. Why do you come here?" "Because it is on board the Dolphin that I wish to serve, and under the orders of Captain James Playfair." "I do not want you." "There is always need of a strong man, and if to prove my strength you will try me with 3 or 4 of the strongest fellows of your crew, I am ready." "That will do," replied James Playfair. "And what is your name?" "Croxton, at your service." "The same," replied the skipper. The captain made a few steps backwards in order to get a better view of the giant, who presented himself in this odd fashion. The height, the build, and the look of the sailor did not deny his pretensions to strength. "Where have you sailed?" asked Playfair of him. "A little everywhere." "And do you know where the Dolphin is bound for?" "Yes, and that is what tempts me." "Ah, well, I have no mind to let a fellow of your stamp escape me. Go and find the first mate and get him to enroll you." 210 Having said this, the captain expected to see the man turn on his heel and run to the bows, but he was mistaken. Croxton did not stir. "Well, did you hear me?" asked the captain. "Yes, but it is not all," replied the sailor. "I have something else to ask you." "Ah, you are wasting my time," replied James sharply. "I have not a moment to lose in talking." "I shall not keep you long," replied Croxton. 2 words more and that is all. I was going to tell you that I have a nephew." "He has a fine uncle then," interrupted James Playfair. "Ho, ho," laughed Croxton. "Have you finished?" asked the captain very impatiently. "Well, this is what I have to say. When one takes the uncle, the nephew comes into the bargain." "Ah, indeed." "Yes, that is the custom. The one does not go without the other." "And what is this nephew of yours?" "A lad of 15 whom I am going to train to the sea. He is willing to learn, and will make a fine sailor some day." "How now, Master Croxton?" cried James Playfair. "Do you think the Dolphin is a training school for cabin boys?" 211 Don't let us speak ill of cabin boys. There was one of them who became Admiral Nelson and another Admiral Franklin. "Upon my honour, friend," replied James Playfair, "you have a way of speaking which I like. Bring your nephew, but if I don't find the uncle the hearty fellow he pretends to be, he will have some business with me. Go, and be back in an hour." Croxton did not want to be told twice. He bowed awkwardly to the captain of the Dolphin, and went on to the quay. An hour afterwards he came on board with his nephew, a boy of 14 or 15, rather delicate and weakly looking, with a timid and astonished air, which showed that he did not possess his uncle's self-possession and vigorous corporeal qualities. Croxton was even obliged to encourage him by such words as these. "Come," said he, "don't be frightened, they are not going to eat us, Besides, there is yet time to return." "No, no," replied the young man, "and may God protect us." The same day the sailor Crockston and his nephew were inscribed in the muster roll of the Dolphin. The next morning at 5 o'clock, the fires of the steamer were well fed, the deck trembled under the vibrations of the boiler, and the steam rushed hissing through the escape pipes. The hour of departure had arrived. A considerable crowd, in spite of the early hour, flocked on the quays and on Glasgow Bridge. They had come to salute the bold steamer for the last time. Vincent Playfair was there to say goodbye to Captain James, but he conducted himself on this occasion like a Roman of the good old times. His was a heroic countenance, and the 2 loud kisses with which he gratified his nephew were the indication of a strong mind. "Go, James," said he to the young captain, "go quickly and come back quicker still. Above all, don't abuse your position. Sell at a good price, make a good bargain, and you will have your uncle's esteem." On this recommendation, borrowed from the manual of the perfect merchant, the uncle and nephew separated, and all the visitors left the boat. At this moment Crockston and John Stiggs stood together on the forecastle, while the former remarked to his nephew, this is well. Before 2 o'clock we shall be at sea, and I have a good opinion of a voyage which begins like this." For reply the novice pressed Crockston's hand. James Playfair then gave the orders for departure. "Have we pressure on?" he asked of his mate. "Yes, Captain," replied Mr. Matthew. "Well then's weigh anchor." This was immediately done, and the screws began to 213 move. The Dolphin trembled, passed between the ships in the port, and soon disappeared from the sight of the people, who shouted their last hurrahs. And soon disappeared. The descent of the Clyde was easily accomplished. One might almost say that this river had been made by the hand of man, and even by the hand of a master. For 60 years, thanks to the dredges and constant dragging, it has gained 15 feet in depth, and its breadth has been tripled between the quays and the town. Soon the forests of masts and chimneys were lost in the smoke and fog, the noise of the foundry hammers, and the hatchets of the timber yards grew fainter in the distance. After the village of Patrick had been passed, the factories gave way to country houses and villas. The Dolphin, slackening her speed, sailed between the dikes which carry the river above the shores, and often through very narrow channel, which however is only a small inconvenience for a navigable river, for after all depth is of more importance than width. The steamer, guided by one of those excellent pilots from the Irish Sea, passed without hesitation between floating buoys, stone columns, and biggings, surmounted with lighthouses, which mark the entrance to the channel. Beyond the town of Renfrew, at the foot of Kilpatrick Hills, the Clyde grew wider. Then came Booling Bay, at the end of which opens the mouth of the canal, which joins Edinburgh to Glasgow. Lastly, at the height of 400 feet 214 from the ground, was seen the outline of Dumbarton Castle, almost indiscernible through the mists, and soon the harbour boats of Glasgow were rocked on the waves which the Dolphin caused. Some miles farther on Greenock, the birthplace of James Watt, was passed. The Dolphin now found herself at the mouth of the Clyde, and at the entrance of the gulf by which it empties its waters into the Northern Ocean. Here the first undulations of the sea were felt, and the steamer ranged along the picturesque coast of the Isle of Arran. At last the promontory of Canter, which runs out into the channel, was doubled. The Isle of Rathlin was hailed. The pilot returned by a shore boat to his cutter, which was cruising in the open sea. The Dolphin, returning to her captain's authority, took a less frequented route round the north of Ireland, and soon, having lost sight of the last European land, found herself in the open ocean. Chapter 3. The Dolphin had a good crew, not fighting men or boarding sailors but good working men, and that was all she wanted. These brave, determined fellows were all more or less merchants. They sought a fortune rather than glory. They had no flag to display, no colours to defend with cannon. In fact, all the artillery on board consisted of 2 small swivel signal guns. The Dolphin shot bravely across the water, and fulfilled the utmost expectations of both builder and captain. Soon she passed the limit of British seas. There was not a ship in sight. The great ocean route was free. Besides, no ship of the Federal Marine would have a right to attack her beneath the English flag. Followed she might be, and prevented from forcing the blockade, and precisely for this reason had James Playfair sacrificed everything to the speed of his ship, in order not to be pursued. Howbeit a careful watch was kept on board, and in spite 216 of the extreme cold, a man was always in the rigging ready to signal the smallest sail that appeared on the horizon. When evening came, Captain James gave the most precise orders to Mr. Matthew. Don't leave the man on watch too long in the rigging, the cold may seize him, and in that case it is impossible to keep a good lookout. Change your men often. I understand, Captain, replied Mr. Matthew. Try Croxton for that work. The fellow pretends to have excellent sight. It must be put to trial. Put him on the morning watch, he will have the morning mists to see through. If anything particular happens, call me. This said, James Playfair went to his cabin. Mr. Matthew called Croxton and told him the captain's orders. Tomorrow at 6 o'clock, said he, you are to relieve watch of the main masthead. For reply, Croxton gave a decided grunt, but Mr. Matthew had hardly turned his back when the sailor muttered some incomprehensible words, and then cried. What on earth did he say about the mainmast? At this moment his nephew, John Stiggs, joined him on the forecastle. Well, my good Croxton, said he. It's all right, said the seaman with a forced smile. There is only one thing, this wretched boat shakes herself like a dog coming out of the water, and it makes my head confused. Dear Croxton, and it is for my sake. For you and him, replied Croxton, but not a word about that, John, trust in God, and he will not forsake you. So saying, John Stiggs and Croxton went to the sailor's berth, but the sailor did not lie down before he had seen the young novice comfortably settled in the narrow cabin which he had got for him. The next day at 6 o'clock in the morning, Croxton got up to go to his place. He went on deck, where the first officer ordered him to go up into the rigging and keep good watch. At these words the sailor seemed undecided what to do, then making up his mind, he went towards the bows of the Dolphin. Well, where are you off to now? Cried Mr. Matthew. Where you sent me, answered Croxton. I told you to go to the main mast. And I am going there, replied the sailor, in an unconcerned tone, continuing his way to the poop. Are you a fool? Cried Mr. Matthew impatiently. You are looking for the bars of the main on the foremast. You are like a cockney who doesn't know how to twist a 218 cat o' nine tails or make a splice. On board what ship can you have been, man? The main mast, stupid, the main mast. The sailors who had run up to hear what was going on burst out laughing when they saw Croxton's disconcerted look as he went back to the forecastle. So, said he, looking up the mast, the top of which was quite invisible through the morning mists, so am I to climb up here? Yes, replied Mr. Matthew, and hurry yourself. By St. Patrick, a federal ship would have time to get her bowsprit fast in our rigging before that lazy fellow could get to his post. Will you go up? Without a word, Croxton got on the bulwarks with some difficulty. Then he began to climb the rigging with most visible awkwardness, like a man who did not know how to make use of his hands or feet. When he had reached the top gallant, instead of springing lightly onto it, he remained motionless, clinging to the ropes as if he had been seized with giddiness. Mr. Matthew, irritated by his stupidity, ordered him to come down immediately. That fellow there, said he to the boatswain, has never been a sailor in his life. Johnston, just go and see what he has in his bundle. The boatswain made haste to the sailor's berth. In the meantime Croxton was with difficulty coming 219 down again, but his foot having slipped, he slid down the rope he had hold of and fell heavily on the deck. Clumsy blockhead, landlubber, cried Mr. Matthew by way of consolation. What did you come to do on board the Dolphin? Ah, you entered as an able seaman, and you cannot even distinguish the main from the foremast. I shall have a little talk with you. Croxton made no attempt to speak. He bent his back like a man resigned for anything he might have to bear. Just then the boatswain returned. This, said he to the first officer, is all that I have found, a suspicious portfolio with letters. Give them here, said Mr. Matthew. Letters with federal stamps, Mr. Halliburtt of Boston, an abolitionist, a federalist. Wretch, you are nothing but a traitor and have sneaked on board to betray us. Never mind, you will be paid for your trouble with the cat o' nine tails. Boatswain, call the captain, and you others just keep an eye on that rogue there. Croxton received these compliments with a hideous grimace, but he did not open his lips. They had fastened him to the capstan, and he could move neither hand nor foot. A few minutes later James Playfair came out of his cabin and went to the forecastle, where Mr. Matthew 220 immediately acquainted him with the details of the case. What have you to say? Asked James Playfair, scarcely able to restrain his anger. Nothing, replied Croxton. And what did you come on board my ship for? Nothing. And what do you expect from me now? Nothing. Who are you, an American, as these letters seem to prove? Crockston did not answer. Boatswain, said James Playfair, 50 lashes with the cat-o'-nine-tails to loosen his tongue. Will that be enough, Crockston? It will remain to be seen, replied John Stiggs' uncle without moving a muscle. Now then, come along, men, said the boatswain. At this order 2 strong sailors stripped Crockston of his woolen jersey. They had already seized the formidable weapon and laid it across the prisoner's shoulders, when the novice, John Stiggs, pale and agitated, hurried on deck. "Captain," exclaimed he. "Ah, the nephew," remarked James Playfair. "Captain," repeated the novice with a violent effort to 221 steady his voice, "I will tell you what Crockston does not want to say. I will hide it no longer. Yes, he is American and so am I. We are both enemies of the slaveholders, but not traitors come on board to betray the Dolphin into the hands of the Federalists." "What did you come to do then?" asked the captain in a severe tone, examining the novice attentively. The latter hesitated a few seconds before replying, then he said, "Captain, I should like to speak to you in private." "Captain," exclaimed he. Whilst John Stiggs made this request, James Playfair did not cease to look carefully at him. The sweet young face of the novice, his peculiarly gentle voice, the delicacy and whiteness of his hands, hardly disguised by paint, the large eyes, the animation of which could not hide their tenderness, all this together gave rise to a certain suspicion in the captain's mind. When John Stiggs had made his request, Playfair glanced fixedly at Crockston, who shrugged his shoulders. Then he fastened a questioning look on the novice, which the latter could not withstand, and said simply to him, "Come." John Stiggs followed the captain on to the poop, and then James Playfair, opening the door of his cabin, said to the novice, whose cheeks were pale with emotion, "Be so kind as to walk in, miss." John, thus addressed, blushed violently, and 2 tears rolled involuntarily down his cheeks. 222, "Don't be alarmed, miss," said James Playfair in a gentle voice, "but be so good as to tell me how I come to have the honour of having you on board." The young girl hesitated a moment, then reassured by the captain's look, she made up her mind to speak. "Sir," said she, "I wanted to join my father at Charleston. The town is besieged by land and blockaded by sea. I knew not how to get there when I heard that the Dolphin meant to force the blockade. I came on board your ship, and I beg you to forgive me if I acted without your consent, which you would have refused me." "Certainly," said James Playfair. "I did well then not to ask you," resumed the young girl with a firmer voice. The captain crossed his arms, walked round his cabin, and then came back. "What is your name?" said he. "Jenny Halliburtt." "Your father, if I remember rightly the address on the letters, is he not from Boston?" "Yes, sir." "And a northerner is thus in a southern town in the thickest of the war?" "My father is a prisoner. He was at Charleston when the first shot of the Civil War was fired, and the troops of the Union driven from Fort Sumter by the Confederates. 223, my father's opinions exposed him to the hatred of the Slavist part, and by the order of General Beauregard he was imprisoned. I was then in England, living with a relation who has just died, and left alone with no help but that of Crockston, our faithful servant. I wished to go to my father and share his prison with him." "What was Mr. Halliburtt then?" asked James Playfair. "A loyal and brave journalist," replied Jenny proudly, "one of the noblest editors of the Tribune, and the one who was the boldest in defending the cause of the Negroes." "An abolitionist," cried the captain angrily, "one of those men who, under the vain pretense of abolishing slavery, have deluged their country with blood and ruin." "Sir," replied Jenny Halliburtt, growing pale, "you are insulting my father. You must not forget that I stand alone to defend him." The young captain blushed scarlet. Anger mingled with shame struggled in his breast. Perhaps he would have answered the young girl, but he succeeded in restraining himself, and opening the door of the cabin, he called "Boatswain." The boatswain came to him directly. "This cabin will henceforward belong to Miss Jenny Halliburtt. Have a cart made ready for me at the end of the poop. That's all I want." 224, the boatswain looked with a stupefied stare at the young novice addressed in a feminine name, but on a sign from James Playfair he went out. "And now, miss, you are at home," said the young captain of the Dolphin. Then he retired. Chapter 4. Crockston's trick. It was not long before the whole crew knew Miss Halliburtt's story, which Crockston was no longer hindered from telling. By the captain's orders he was released from the capstan, and the cat o' nine tails returned to its place. "A pretty animal," said Crockston, "especially when it shows its velvety paws." As soon as he was free, he went down to the sailors' berths, found a small portmanteau and carried it to Miss Jenny. The young girl was now able to resume her feminine attire, but she remained in her cabin and did not again appear on deck. As for Crockston, it was well and duly agreed that, as he was no more a sailor than a horse-guard, he should be exempt from all duty on board. In the meanwhile the Dolphin, with her twin screws 226 cutting the waves, sped rapidly across the Atlantic, and there was nothing now to do but keep a strict lookout. The day following the discovery of Miss Jenny's identity, James Playfair paced the deck at the poop with a rapid step. He had made no attempt to see the young girl and resume the conversation of the day before. Whilst he was walking to and fro, Crockston passed him several times, looking at him askant with a satisfied grin. He evidently wanted to speak to the captain, and at last his persistent manner attracted the attention of the latter, who said to him, somewhat impatiently, "How now, what do you want? You are turning round me like a swimmer round a buoy. When are you going to leave off?" "Excuse me, Captain," answered Crockston, winking. "I wanted to speak to you." "Speak then." "Oh, it is nothing very much. I only wanted to tell you frankly that you are a good fellow at bottom." "Why at bottom?" "At bottom in surface also." "I don't want your compliments." "I am not complimenting you. I shall wait to do that when you have gone to the end." "To what end?" "To the end of your task." 227. I have a task to fulfill." "Decidedly you have taken the young girl and myself on board. Good. You have given up your cabin to Miss Halliburtt. Good. You released me from the cat o' nine tails. Nothing could be better. You are going to take us straight to Charleston. That's delightful, but it is not all." "How not all?" cried James Playfair, amazed at Crockston's boldness. "No, certainly not," replied the latter with a knowing look. "The father is prisoner there." "Well, what about that?" "Well, the father must be rescued." "Rescue Miss Halliburtt's father?" "Most certainly, and it is worth risking something for such a noble man and courageous citizen as he." "Master Crockston," said James Playfair, frowning, "I am not in the humour for your jokes, so have a care what you say." "You misunderstand me, Captain," said the American. "I am not joking in the least, but speaking quite seriously. What I have proposed may at first seem very absurd to you. When you have thought it over you will see that you cannot do otherwise." "What do you mean, that I must deliver Mr. Halliburtt?" "Just so. You can demand his release of General Beauregard, who will not refuse you." 228. "But if he does refuse me?" "In that case," replied Crockston in a deliberate tone, "we must use stronger measures and carry off the prisoner by force." "So," cried James Playfair, who was beginning to get angry, "so, not content with passing through the Federal fleets and forcing the blockade of Charleston, I must run out to sea again from under the cannon of the forts, and this to deliver a gentleman I know nothing of, one of those abolitionists whom I detest, one of those journalists who shed ink instead of their blood." "Oh, it is but a cannon shot more or less," added Crockston. "Master Crockston," said James Playfair, "mind what I say. If ever you mention this affair again to me, I will send you to the hold for the rest of the passage, to teach you manners." Thus saying, the captain dismissed the American, who went off murmuring, Well, I am not altogether displeased with this conversation. At any rate the affair is broached. It will do, it will do." James Playfair had hardly meant it when he said an abolitionist whom I detest. He did not in the least side with the Federals, but he did not wish to admit that the question of slavery was the predominant reason for the Civil War of the United States. In spite of President 229 Lincoln's formal declaration, did he then think that the Southern states, 8 out of 36, were right in separating when they had been voluntarily united? Not so. He detested the Northerners, and that was all. He detested them as brothers separated from the common family, true Englishmen, who had thought it right to do what he, James Playfair, disapproved of with regard to the United States. These were the political opinions of the captain of the Dolphin, but more than this, the American war interfered with him personally, and he had a grudge against those who had caused this war. One can understand, then, how he would receive a proposition to deliver an abolitionist, thus bringing down on him the Confederates with whom he pretended to do business. However, Crockston's insinuation did not fail to disturb him. He cast the thought from him, but it returned unceasingly to his mind, and when Miss Jenny came on deck the next day for a few minutes, he dared not look her in the face. And really it was a great pity, for this young girl with the fair hair and sweet, intelligent face deserved to be looked at by a young man of 30. But James felt embarrassed in her presence. He felt that this charming creature, who had been educated in the school of misfortune, possessed a strong and generous soul. He understood that his silence towards her inferred a refusal to acquiesce in 230 her dearest wishes. Besides, Miss Jenny never looked out for James Playfair, neither did she avoid him. Thus, for the first few days they spoke little or not at all to each other. Miss Halliburtt scarcely ever left her cabin, and it is certain she would never have addressed herself to the captain of the Dolphin if it had not been for Crockston's strategy, which brought both parties together. The worthy American was a faithful servant of the Halliburtt family. He had been brought up in his master's house, and his devotion knew no bounds. His good sense equalled his courage and energy, and, as has been seen, he had a way of looking things straight in the face. He was very seldom discouraged, and could generally find a way out of the most intricate dangers with a wonderful skill. This honest fellow had taken it into his head to deliver Mr. Halliburtt, to employ the captain's ship, and the captain himself for this purpose, and to return with him to England. Such was his intention, so long as the young girl had no other object than to rejoin her father and share his captivity. It was this Crockston tried to make the captain understand, as we have seen, but the enemy had not yet surrendered, on the contrary. "Now," said he, "it is absolutely necessary that Miss Jenny and the captain come to an understanding. If they are going to be sulky like this all the passage, we shall get nothing done. They must speak, discuss. Let them dispute 231 even, so long as they talk, and I'll be hanged if during their conversation James Playfair does not propose himself what he refused me today." But when Crockston saw that the young girl and the young man avoided each other, he began to be perplexed. "We must look sharp," said he to himself, and the morning of the 4th day he entered Miss Halliburtt's cabin, rubbing his hands with an air of perfect satisfaction. "Good news," cried he, "good news. You will never guess what the captain has proposed to me. A very noble young man he is, now try." "Ah," replied Jenny, whose heart beat violently, "has he proposed to?" "To deliver Mr. Halliburtt, to carry him off from the Confederates and bring him to England." "Is it true?" cried Jenny. "It is, as I say, miss. What a good-hearted man this James Playfair is. These English are either all good or all bad. Ah, he may reckon on my gratitude, and I am ready to cut myself in pieces if it would please him." Jenny's joy was profound on hearing Crockston's words. Deliver her father. She had never dared to think of such a plan, and the captain of the Dolphin was going to risk his ship and crew. "That's what he is," added Crockston, "and this, Miss Jenny, is well worth an acknowledgment from you." 232 more than an acknowledgment, cried the young girl, "a lasting friendship." And immediately she left the cabin to find James Playfair, and expressed to him the sentiments which flowed from her heart. "Getting on by degrees," muttered the American. James Playfair was pacing to and fro on the poop, and, as may be thought, he was very much surprised, not to say amazed, to see the young girl go up to him, her eyes moist with grateful tears, and holding out her hand to him, saying, "Thank you, sir, thank you for your kindness, which I should never have dared to expect from a stranger." "Miss," replied the captain, as if he understood nothing of what she was talking, and could not understand, "I do not know." "Nevertheless, sir, you are going to brave many dangers, perhaps compromise your interests for me, and you have done so much already in offering me on board an hospitality to which I have no right whatever." "Pardon me, Miss Jenny," interrupted James Playfair, "but I protest again I do not understand your words. I have acted towards you as any well-bred man would towards a lady, and my conduct deserves neither so many thanks nor so much gratitude." 233 Mr. Playfair, said Jenny, "it is useless to pretend any longer, Crockston has told me all." "Ah," said the captain, "Crockston has told you all, then I understand less than ever the reason for your leaving your cabin, and saying these words which—" "Thank you, sir, thank you." Whilst speaking, the captain felt very much embarrassed. He remembered the rough way in which he had received the American's overtures, but Jenny, fortunately for him, did not give him time for further explanation. She interrupted him, holding out her hand and saying, "Mr. James, I had no other object in coming on board your ship except to go to Charleston, and there, however cruel the slaveholders may be, they will not refuse to let a poor girl share her father's prison, that was all. I had never thought of a return as possible. But since you are so generous as to wish for my father's deliverance, since you will attempt everything to save him, be assured you have my deepest gratitude." James did not know what to do or what part to assume. He bit his lip. He dared not take the hand offered him. He saw perfectly that Croxton had compromised him, so that escape was impossible. At the same time he had no thoughts of delivering Mr. Halliburtt and getting complicated in a disagreeable business. But how dash to the ground the hope which had arisen in this poor girl's heart? How refuse the hand which she held out to him with a feeling of such 234 profound friendship? How change to tears of grief the tears of gratitude which filled her eyes? So the young man tried to reply evasively, in a manner which would ensure his liberty of action for the future. "Miss Jenny," said he, "rest assured I will do everything in my power for—" And he took the little hand in both of his, but with the gentle pressure he felt his heart melt and his head grow confused. Words to express his thoughts failed him. He stammered out some incoherent words. Miss Jenny, for you." Croxton, who was watching him, rubbed his hands, grinning and repeating to himself, it will come, it has come." How James Playfair would have managed to extricate himself from his embarrassing position no one knows, but fortunately for him, if not for the Dolphin, the man on watch was heard crying, "Ahoy, officer of the watch!" "What now?" asked Mr. Matthew. "A sail to windward." James Playfair, leaving the young girl, immediately sprang to the shrouds of the mainmast. Chapter 5. The shot from the Iroquois and Miss Jenny's arguments. Until now the navigation of the Dolphin had been very fortunate. Not one ship had been signalled before the sail hailed by the man on watch. The Dolphin was then in 32 degrees 51 latitude and degrees 43 west longitude. For 48 hours a fog which now began to rise had covered the ocean. If this mist favoured the Dolphin by hiding her course, it also prevented any observations at a distance being made, and without being aware of it, she might be sailing side by side, so to speak, with the ships she wished most to avoid. Now this is just what had happened, and when the ship was signalled she was only 3 miles to windward. When James Playfair had reached the bars, he saw distinctly, through an opening in the mist, a large Federal corvette in full pursuit of the Dolphin. He saw distinctly. 236 After having carefully examined her, the captain came down on deck again and called to the first officer. "Mr. Matthew," said he, "what do you think of this ship?" "I think, Captain, that it is a Federal cruiser which suspects our intentions." "There is no possible doubt of her nationality," said James Playfair. "Look." At this moment, the starry flag of the North United States appeared on the gaff yards of the corvette, and the latter asserted her colours with a cannon shot. "An invitation to show ours," said Mr. Matthew. "Well, let us show them, there is nothing to be ashamed of." "What's the good?" replied James Playfair. "Our flag will hardly protect us, and it will not hinder those people from paying us a visit. No, let us go ahead." "And go quickly," replied Mr. Matthew, "for if my eyes do not deceive me, I have already seen that corvette lying off Liverpool, where she went to watch the ships in building. My name is not Matthew, if that is not the Iroquois on her taffrail." "And is she fast?" "One of the fastest vessels of the Federal Marine." "What guns does she carry?" 8. Pood. "Oh, don't shrug your shoulders, Captain," said Mr. 237 Matthew in a serious tone. "2 out of those 8 guns are rifled, one is a 60-pounder on the forecastle, and the other a 100-pounder on deck." "Upon my soul," exclaimed James Playfair, "they are Parrott-s and will carry 3 miles. "Yes, and farther than that, Captain." "Ah well, Mr. Matthew, let their guns be 60 or only 4-pounders, and let them carry 3 miles or 500 yards, it is all the same if we can go fast enough to avoid their shot. We will show this Iroquois how a ship can go when she is built on purpose to go. Have the fires well banked up, Mr. Matthew." The first officer gave the captain's orders to the engineer, and soon volumes of black smoke curled from the steamer's chimneys. This proceeding did not seem to please the corvette, for she made the Dolphin the signal to lie to, but James Playfair paid no attention to this warning, and did not change his ship's course. "Now," said he, "we shall see what the Iroquois will do. There is a fine opportunity for her to try her guns. Go ahead full speed." "Good," exclaimed Mr. Matthew, "she will not be long in saluting us." Returning to the poop, the captain saw Miss Halliburtt sitting quietly near the bulwarks. 238, Miss Jenny," said he, "we shall probably be chased by that corvette you see to windward, and as she will speak to us with shot, I beg to offer you my arm to take you to your cabin again." "Thank you very much, Mr. Playfair," replied the young girl, looking at him, "but I am not afraid of cannon shots." "However, miss, in spite of the distance, there may be some danger." "Oh, I was not brought up to be fearful. They accustom us to everything in America, and I assure you that the shot from the Iroquois will not make me lower my head." "You are brave, Miss Jenny." "Let us admit, then, that I am brave, and allow me to stay by you." "I can refuse you nothing, Miss Halliburtt," replied the captain, looking at the young girl's calm face. These words were hardly uttered when they saw a line of white smoke issue from the bulwarks of the corvette. Before the report had reached the Dolphin, a projectile whizzed through the air in the direction of the steamer. At about 20 fathoms from the Dolphin, the shot, the speed of which had sensibly lessened, skimmed over the surface of the waves, marking its passage by a 239 series of water jets. Then, with another burst, it rebounded to a certain height, passed over the Dolphin, grazing the mizzen-yards on the starboard side, fell at 30 fathoms beyond, and was buried in the waves. "By Jove," exclaimed James Playfair, "we must get along, another slap like that is not to be waited for." "Oh," exclaimed Mr. Matthew, "they will take some time to reload such pieces." "Upon my honour, it is an interesting sight," said Crockston, who, with arms crossed, stood perfectly at his ease looking at the scene, "and to say they are friends who send such brandy balls." "Ah, that's you," cried James Playfair, scanning the American from head to foot. "It is me, Captain," replied the American, undisturbed. "I have come to see how these brave Federals fire. Not badly, in truth, not badly." The captain was going to answer Crockston sharply, but at this moment a second shot struck the sea on the starboard side. "Good," cried James Playfair, "we have already gained 2 cables on this Iroquois. Your friends sail like a buoy, do you hear, Master Crockston?" "I will not say they don't," replied the American, "and for the first time in my life it does not fail to please me." 240 a third shot fell still farther astern, and in less than 10 minutes the Dolphin was out of range of the corvette's guns. "So much for patent logs, Mr. Matthew," said James Playfair. "Thanks to those shot we know how to rate our speed. Now have the fires lowered, it is not worthwhile to waste our coal uselessly." "It is a good ship that you command," said Miss Halliburtt to the young captain. "Yes, Miss Jenny, my good Dolphin, makes her 17 knots, and before the day is over, we shall have lost sight of that corvette." James Playfair did not exaggerate the sailing qualities of his ship, and the sun had not set before the masts of the American ship had disappeared below the horizon. This incident allowed the captain to see Miss Halliburtt's character in a new light. Besides, the ice was broken henceforward during the whole of the voyage. The interviews between the captain and his passenger were frequent and prolonged. He found her to be a young girl, calm, strong, thoughtful, and intelligent, speaking with great ease, having her own ideas about everything, and expressing her thoughts with a conviction which unconsciously penetrated James Playfair's heart. She loved her country, she was zealous in the great cause of the Union, and expressed herself on the Civil War 241 in the United States with an enthusiasm of which no other woman would have been capable. Thus it happened more than once that James Playfair found it difficult to answer her, even when questions purely mercantile arose in connection with the war. Miss Jenny attacked them none the less vigorously, and would come to no other terms whatever. At first James argued a great deal, and tried to uphold the Confederates against the Federals, to prove that the secessionists were in the right, and that if the people were united voluntarily, they might separate in the same manner. But the young girl would not yield on this point. She demonstrated that the question of slavery was predominant in the struggle between the North and South Americans, that it was far more a war in the cause of morals and humanity than politics, and James could make no answer. Besides, during these discussions, which he listened to attentively, It is difficult to say whether he was more touched by Miss Halliburtt's arguments or the charming manner in which she spoke. But at last he was obliged to acknowledge, among other things, that slavery was the principal feature in the war, that it must be put an end to decisively, and the last horrors of barbarous times abolished. It has been said that the political opinions of the captain did not trouble him much. He would have sacrificed his most serious opinion before such enticing arguments 242, and under like circumstances. He made a good bargain of his ideas for the same reason, but at last he was attacked in his tenderest point. This was the question of the traffic in which the Dolphin was being employed, and consequently, the ammunition which was being carried to the Confederates. "Yes, Mr. James," said Miss Halliburtt, "gratitude does not hinder me from speaking with perfect frankness. On the contrary, you are a brave seaman, a clever merchant. The House of Playfair is noted for its respectability, but in this case it fails in its principles and follows a trade unworthy of it." "How," cried James, "the House of Playfair ought not to attempt such a commercial enterprise." "No, it is taking ammunition to the unhappy creatures in revolt against the government of their country, and it is lending arms to a bad cause. Upon my honor, Miss Jenny, I will not discuss the fight of the Confederates with you. I will only answer you with one word. I am a merchant, and as such I only occupy myself with the interests of my house. I look for gain wherever there is an opportunity of getting it." "That is precisely what is to be blamed, Mr. James," replied the young girl. "Profit does not excuse it. Thus, when you supply arms to the Southerners with which to continue a criminal war, you are quite as guilty 243 as when you sell opium to the Chinese, which stupefies them." "Oh, for once, Miss Jenny, this is too much, and I cannot admit." "No, what I say is just, and when you consider it, when you understand the part you are playing, when you think of the results for which you are responsible, you will yield to me in this point, as in so many others." James Playfair was dumbfounded at these words. He left the young girl, a prey to angry thoughts, for he felt his powerlessness to answer. Then he sulked like a child for half an hour, and an hour later he returned to the singular young girl who could overwhelm him with convincing arguments, with quite a pleasant smile. In short, however it may have come about, and although he would not acknowledge it to himself, Captain James Playfair belonged to himself no longer. He was no longer commander-in-chief on board his own ship. Thus, to Crockston's great joy, Mr. Halliburtt's affairs appeared to be in a good way. The captain seemed to have decided to undertake everything in his power to deliver Miss Jenny's father, and for this he would be obliged to compromise the Dolphin, his cargo, his crew, and incur the displeasure of his worthy Uncle Vincent. Chapter 6. Sullivan Island Channel. 2 days after the meeting with the Iroquois, the Dolphin found herself abreast of the Bermudas, where she was assailed by a violent squall. These isles are frequently visited by hurricanes, and are celebrated for shipwrecks. It is here that Shakespeare has placed the exciting scene of his drama, The Tempest, in which Ariel and Caliban dispute for the empire of the floods. The squall was frightful. James Playfair thought once of running for one of the Bermudas, where the English had a military post. It would have been a sad waste of time, and therefore especially to be regretted. Happily, the Dolphin behaved herself wonderfully well in the storm, and after flying a whole day before the tempest, she was able to resume her course towards the American coast. The squall. But if James Playfair had been pleased with his ship, he 245 had not been less delighted with the young girl's bravery. Miss Halliburtt had passed the worst hours of the storm at his side, and James knew that a profound, imperious, irresistible love had taken possession of his whole being. "Yes," said he, "this brave girl is mistress on board. She turns me like the sea a ship in distress. I feel that I am foundering. What will Uncle Vincent say? Ah, poor nature, I am sure that if Jenny asked me to throw all this cursed cargo into the sea, I should do it without hesitating for love of her." Happily for the firm of Playfair & Co., Miss Halliburtt did not demand this sacrifice. Nevertheless, the poor captain had been taken captive, and Crockston, who read his heart like an open book, rubbed his hands gleefully. "We will hold him fast," he muttered to himself, "and before a week has passed my master will be quietly installed in one of the best cabins of the Dolphin." As for Miss Jenny, did she perceive the feelings which she inspired? Did she allow herself to share them? No one could say, and James Playfair least of all. The young girl kept a perfect reserve, and her secret remained deeply buried in her heart. But whilst love was making such progress in the heart of the young captain, The Dolphin sped with no less rapidity towards Charleston. On the 13th of January, the watch signalled land 10,246 miles to the west. It was a low-lying coast, and almost blended with the line of the sea in the distance. Crockston was examining the horizon attentively, and about 9 o'clock in the morning he cried, "Charleston Lighthouse." Crockston was examining the horizon attentively,